Here you go. Lefties demonstrating at the Dakota Access Pipeline site. They have been ordered to leave, so they have set fire to their camp. Burning right now, according to what I've just noticed. Fires, are they good for the atmosphere for all those people who complain about the fuels we take out of the ground causing man-made global warming, and then you turn around and decide you're going to set a fire, a large fire, and burn an encampment down? Are there any environmental issues involved with that? I suppose there are. These same people have left behind abandoned automobiles, which they expect flooding when the snow melts there at the camp. So you'll have all of the fluids from the automobiles that will get into the water. They've left 250 truckloads of garbage behind. Yeah, they're really good stewards of the environment, as they claim. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX at newsradio1310.com. Speaking of the fuels we take out of the ground, I have, over the last 15 years, I never thought this would happen, but it's my lifestyle. I have averaged less than 10,000 miles driving over the course each year of the last 15 years. I have a I have a Jeep that I bought right off a showroom floor in September of 2008. It has under 80,000 miles on it, and it was my primary vehicle for 8 years. That it has under 80,000 miles on it. Then I bought a second vehicle, and I may have put in the last couple of months. I did one long trip out to Idaho Falls and back. I don't think I put a couple of thousand miles on that vehicle yet. So, a lot of Americans out there who like to drive are apparently driving less. The Wall Street Journal reported Friday. I've been holding on to this since last week. The Wall Street Journal reported a year ago when we had a dip in gasoline prices, Americans suddenly were driving a lot more, and then it leveled off. Americans are driving so little now, doing so little driving, that the oil glut is the biggest it has been since 1990, since just before the opening of the first Gulf War, 27 years ago. All of these people in OPEC and other places who thought that we were going to have a long-term rally in the price of oil, not going to happen. And in fact, if this continues, we're going to see another big dip in the cost of a barrel of oil, and of course that will translate into cheaper gasoline costs. Got a couple of other things here. We have been told that the cheaper costs mean that we're going to have an end to the fracking boom in this country, and that means the Bakken Shale in North Dakota and the big field in Texas and other places that we're producing oil at. It won't be worthwhile for the companies to go out there and remove that, just like we saw with the tar sands up in Alberta. That was, I think, the tar sands oil had to be about $70 per barrel in order to continue that. And we had a time where fracking, it was said we had to be 70, then it was 60, and then it was $50 a barrel. Well, the costs keep dropping because it had, we become much more efficient at it. Liberals don't like fracking. They tell us it's bad for the environment. Well, they don't want us using those fuels is why. They keep telling us we can survive with wind power and solar and that we'll be able to power an economy that needs to feed 330 million people. And that population obviously will grow. It's expected to be in about 30 years in excess of 400 million in this country. So you need to use every last resource you have available at the moment. Check this out. This comes from the Washington Examiner today. William D. Balgord, PhD. He's got a PhD in geochemistry. He heads the Environmental and Resources Technology program in Middleton, Wisconsin. Page 2 of his story, or his column today, is guest commentary in the Washington Examiner. Investigations by the U.S. Geological Survey suggest injecting liquid waste into deep strata increases pressure that may trigger weak earthquakes. Geologists previously suggested that inducing minor quakes may have the benefit by releasing the buildup of strain along fault zones and thus preempt strong, damaging earthquakes. Think about that for a moment. The environmentalists have been screaming that all of this fracking going on is actually causing earthquakes and is going to be devastating to the communities nearby. And yet, as it turns out, the minor shaking of the ground that takes place because of fracking is reducing the stress that would cause something along the lines of what happened at the New Madrid Fault in Missouri back in the 1800s, where they had a whopper of an earthquake. Well, this could take the strain off and therefore reduce those big quakes. And the writer says that below 3 on the Richter scale, human beings don't feel a quake. And that means your house isn't going to tip over either because of a quake going on. So, for all of the whining Lefty has been doing about fracking over the last several years, Lefty, it appears you've been wrong. This is really just an effort by the left to shut down the capitalist system. The whole global warming scheme and everything else related to it is just an effort. And the bias involved in all of this, there's a writer at Washington Times named Anthony J. Sadar today who's writing about this and says that's simply what it's about. Those on the left, he says, apparently do not see a leftist ideology permeating certain areas of contemporary science, and so equate scientific conclusions that endorse their beliefs as being absolutely irrefutable. Accurate prediction is one of the biggest challenges in scientific practice, and indeed, an accurate prediction for the right reasons is one of the conditions for a scientific assertion to be correct. But he points out over the last 20, 25 years, most of the predictions made by the global warming alarmists have failed to pass. Why? Because their predictions were based on their own biases and prejudices. A short break. We've got a break we've got to take. It's 9:40. We're at 33. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. There's a great story today out of the newspaper in Nampa called the Press Tribune about a 102-year-old World War II veteran. He's celebrating a birthday. Still in good shape, and he just gave up driving last year. And he credits his longevity when he was growing up on a farm in Oklahoma. He credits his longevity to the fact, he says, I ate everything, and I ate heartily. He was also eating, though, food that wasn't processed. He was eating food that was grown on the farm. There may be a lot to be said about eating your fruits and vegetables that are locally grown, and they're not caked in pesticides, and they haven't been run through processing plants. 102 years old. Now, there's also the story I happened to see last night about a veteran in California, also a World War II veteran. He's just shy of his 93rd birthday. Walked out. He's still driving too. Walked out of his house the other day and recognized that some liberals had burned his American flags, his Navy flag. And because he had flags on his car, they vandalized his car as well. I'm telling you, they have absolutely no control over themselves. Joni Ernst, she's a veteran and a U.S. Senator from Iowa, was holding a veterans forum yesterday when the George Soros rent-a-mob interrupted.
You can holler all you want at me. That's fine. I'm the elected representative. But this was originally scheduled to be a veterans roundtable.
Now, for veterans, the flag represents something very, very important. I shared the story last week about interviewing a group of Iwo Jima survivors back in the early 1990s who told me exactly what it meant to them when they saw, and it was 72 years ago this week that the flag was raised at Iwo Jima. The famous photograph of that taken by Joe Rosenthal still resonates down through the years, and it might be the most famous photograph ever taken. And I remember talking with them about their beliefs in the flag and what it meant to them. And these old-time veterans who go back to that World War II era, part of that greatest generation, even those who didn't lose their lives, they all made tremendous sacrifices. One of my favorite all-time movies, The Best Years of Our Lives, starring Dana Andrews and Frederick March. The first time I ever saw that, it was one of those movies made in the late 1940s during an era when there really wasn't a lot of serious movie making going on. But it really details what these men went through. And he was an actual veteran. You have a fellow who lost his hands at war. His story is told. Frederick March, who'd been a bank executive, and then he went off to war and leading a combat team as a sergeant, comes back and he ends up being an alcoholic, trying to deal with a post-traumatic stress disorder, which we didn't even know about at the time. We didn't know what to call it. Combat fatigue, if you will. And then Dana Andrews' character, who comes back and struggles, having been he'd flown bomber planes during the war, comes back and he struggles with trying to readjust to a life where he's not sure what he's going to do with the rest of his life. He's already, he'd been a laborer who became an officer in the Air Corps, and he came home and suddenly it was as if someone had turned around and said, all right, you're going to go back to your old life of penury before this. And he's trying to deal with that struggle. These people did things for our country. And now you've got liberals out there who are interrupting the forums that Joni Ernst is holding for these men and women. You've also got people burning their flags. I'm so disgusted by the American left. I keep thinking that these demonstrations are going to subside. But what happens if they don't? How do we bring these people back into the fold and allow them to see that what they're doing is just an abomination against everything that this country stands for? It's 947. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com. We're at 33. I wanted to point out today's weather. No, well, it's funny. I looked at it, it said 33, and then it just quickly jumped to 36. Maybe somebody shined a light on the thermometer outside. This is the type of day. It's not going to be, I don't believe it's going to be as windy as it was the last couple of days, which is a good thing because actually temperatures in the mid 30s. That's a good, between the mid 30s and mid 40s is a great temperature to go for a walk. You put on, some warm clothes and you go out for a walk, but you don't, end up all sweaty because in this type of weather, that just, and a little bit of a breeze too, will keep you from, in the summertime when I'm out for a walk, I come home sometimes and my shirt is soaked from the collar all the way down to my navel. But that doesn't happen on a day like today. Walking has become a lot easier for me since I dropped more than 60 pounds as part of the total body transformation system, which is a healthy approach to weight loss and one that is sustainable as well. It was a company that designed this, has been in business over 20 years and has an A-plus rating from the Better Business Bureau. And I've been telling you about the diet now for several months on the air, and it has been proven to reduce the waist circumference and increase your metabolic rate. In fact, the company that is involved with the total body transformation system has actually taken out patents on those two areas. I wanted to point out as well, you will lose 6 times more fat and lose 8 times more weight than normal results from diet and exercise alone. The meal replacement plan is actually healthier than a lot of the foods you would normally be eating, and you can still have a healthy amount of calories during the course of a day. The average participant will drop 22 pounds in 60 days and lose 4 inches off his or her waist. I put on a pair of shorts. I wore them to the Home and Garden Show on Sunday, and these shorts had been very tight on me last summer, and I was surprised I had room within those shorts after I put them on the other day. That is room around my waist. And if you'd like to know more, I wanted to tell you there's an unconditional full money back guarantee, and the cost of the replacement plan is about the same as what you'd be spending on the groceries that you're replacing. Telephone marketing executive Don Chandler, he's also a weight loss beneficiary. He lost over 50 pounds on the total body transformation system. Don's number is 208 731 3560. Again, his telephone number 208 731 3560. About 10 minutes left in our show today, and it's open phones if you like in the last few minutes. You got a comment on anything or question that we've been talking about in the show since we went on air just after 8 o'clock news today. Feel free to give us a telephone call. The number is 736-0300. That's 736-0300. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX and newsradio1310.com. We're at 35. I had planned to spend more time today talking about some legislation that has been moved through the Idaho legislature or has been stalled there, and we may have to devote more time to this another day. Legislators are moving forward with a bill that will stop the profiling of motorcyclists, motorcycle gangs, that is. I was not aware that there was a serious problem already in Idaho with this happening. It's not like deputies and police officers are sitting there and saying to themselves, aha, there goes a couple of guys in chaps and leather jackets. Let's go get them. As I mentioned last summer, I had an encounter with a motorcycle gang, and they had crucifixes on the back of their vests. They were Christian bikers, and I stopped at the diner in Fairfield to go in and get a burger, and they were all there getting ice cream. They're a very dangerous group of people. But I understand that the law is trying to say, look, just because somebody's riding a motorcycle doesn't make them a bad person. I would think the only reason you ever get stopped on a motorcycle is, number one, you're speeding, and I do see some cyclists who like to do that. They love that wind in their face. And number two, if you've got a really noisy bike. But if I had a car and I was speeding or a truck and I also had a muffler issue, I'd get stopped too. It doesn't mean anybody's profiling me. It just means somebody's enforcing the law. It's 34. We've got a caller with us. Caller, you're up next on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com.
Hi, Bill. You raised an interesting question in the last few minutes here about the the status of the liberal and how can a person quote bring them back into the fold. And I don't know if my observations are acceptable or whatever, but I have them. And so I thought I'd mention, when you think about human nature, people have kind of a tendency to understand the difference between right and wrong and good and bad. In fact, almost all of us, and I think including you, we have an internal BS detector.
Yes.
So that when something isn't right, we recognize it right away. However, the difference, what I observe between conservative and liberal, and let's take out the politics, just between honest and dishonest, is that an honest person, when confronted with a challenge, knowing that they've done something wrong and confronted, an honest person will take the path of repentance or try to say, yeah, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have done that. But a dishonest person will take the path of getting angry and violent and try to discredit the challenge and anything but admit that they're wrong. Now, having said that, going back to your question, I think that the only way that we could ever hope to bring them back is to find a solution that makes honesty, how should I say, the ideal solution. Meaning that if we could find a way for a path, because most people honestly want to be honest, if we could find a path to help them achieve that desire, we might have the makings of a solution to bring them back into the fold.
I would hope so, and I thank you for the call. I'm reminded, as I was listening to that, of a former coworker of mine who was an inveterate liar. And it wasn't just big lies, it was small lies. And the lies were used as a way to excuse various behaviors in this person's life. And then when you would catch this person in a lie and confront them about it, then they'd point the finger and say, this individual would point the finger and say, no, you're the one who's wrong. You're responsible. It's your fault. And it was always this deflection, deflection, deflection. And I don't know where it starts. And this person's also a liberal. I don't know where it starts in somebody's life. Maybe it's when you're young and somebody says, who had their hand in the cookie jar? And you figure, well, I'm going to get a paddling, so I'm going to make up a lie. And if it works, then the next time something comes up, you think, well, gee, lying worked the last time. I think I'll do it now. Liberalism, I mentioned earlier, liberals' response to Donald Trump and their anger. He is the least conservative Republican that I've seen in my lifetime. The least. He is the most socially liberal Republican I think I have ever encountered, and likely in the history of the United States. And yet, liberals, this question was brought up by Tucker Carlson to the frothing liberal, rabid liberal he had on his program last night. I shared the comments from her at the beginning of the show today. And they're still, they just, no, because they didn't get their way. And the fact of the matter is, they believe that their way is the only way. And they've been listening in the echo chamber to all of their favorite entertainers and to all of their old professors and whoever else led them down this path to believe it's the only way. And they're so much in denial about the traditional values in this country. They're angry with the churches that they would have attended, or if they ever attended one at all. They're angry with people in government because government isn't really their mommy and daddy, and government can't give them everything they want. and increasingly with a nation $20 trillion in debt. This is the thing. What's going to happen in a few years when we can no longer afford all of the social programs we currently offer? Because you still have to have tanks and ships and airplanes because the same reason you have locks on your doors. There are bad people out there. What's going to happen in a few years when they can no longer have the cake with their meal? The government is no longer going to be, as I mentioned, Walter Williams has a great column today where he said there's just nothing out there that's really free. And yet politicians have told you for so long it is, and they cover up the costs in various ways so they can get away with offering you things that they claim are free so that you'll keep voting for them. What's going to happen when they go to the pantry someday and it's empty? There are going to be a lot of even angrier liberals, and I think that's what they're seeing right now. They're living in a state, they've had a break with reality. They're unable to grasp the fact that their girl lost in November. They're unable to grasp the fact that they've been losing seats all over the country. They're unable to understand that simply that the free lunch is coming to an end. And it's not because people are being mean, and that's what they claim. We're all mean-spirited, rotten Republican racists and bigots. We're not being mean. We're just pointing out you can't keep spending when you don't have anything left to spend. So at some point, they have two choices. A, they can learn to accept that, or two, they can throw a tantrum. And the tantrums are getting increasingly violent, and I'm afraid that that's the route they're going and that they're going to continue to take. And the only way you're going to stop violence, Michael Medved, who's a talk show host over in Seattle, has a great line. He said people told him, or they've been telling him all of his life, violence never solved anything. And his response is, his standard response is, well, violence solved Adolf Hitler. Maybe that's the direction we're headed. Bill Colley with you on Top Story. Rush Limbaugh coming up next following news. Rush Limbaugh between 10 and 1 o'clock. Sean Hannity after 1 o'clock news. Glenn Beck after 4 o'clock news from Fox. Dave Ramsey 7 until 10 tonight. God willing, if the creek don't rise, I'll be back here tomorrow morning between 8 and 10 o'clock. Also wanted to point out Kelton Hatch, yes, the prodigal spokesman from Idaho Fish and Game, joins us between 9 and 10 tomorrow.